This week on Security Weekly, Lance James joins us. We've got a technical segment about Tachyon.net, which may not be the name of that project, but it's really cool, and Joff wrote it, which makes it even cooler. In our stories of the week, do we really know the cost of a breach? Also, Microsoft proves that backdoor keys are a terrible idea. Payment systems from Micros, owned by Oracle, are getting hacked, as well as Samsung Pay. We pontificate about how many 0 days does Uncle Sam own. All that and more. So stay tuned. This is a Security Weekly production. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. Security Weekly is brought to you by the SANS Institute, the most trusted source for computer security training, certification, and research. Visit SANS.org to explore the full curriculum and latest training offerings. Onapsis, the leading provider of solutions to protect ERP systems from cyber attacks. Customers can secure their SAP and Oracle business-critical platforms from espionage, sabotage, and financial fraud risks. Visit them on the web at onapsis.com. Pony Express. Check out their line of penetration testing devices, including the Pwn Pad, the Pwn Phone, and the Pwn Pro. For enterprises, there's Pwn Pulse, providing continuous visibility into wired, Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth spectrums across all physical locations, including remote sites and branch offices. For all those hard-to-reach places, there's Pony Express. Visit them on the web at ponyexpress.com.
And here's your host. He's a man who his tachyons ask him, "Why am I so sticky?" Paul Asadorian.
It's a very sticky situation. Hey, everyone, welcome to Security Weekly. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian. Very excited for this evening. We've got a packed show. As always, we have our guest in studio. But first, Mr. Larry Pesce, of course, in studio here with us this evening.
Back again from DEF CON and Black Hat.
Yes, Hacker Summer Camp.
World Tour, and
it was fun.
It was.
Fun.
Never a dull moment.
On the lines via Skype, Mr. Joff Thayer.
Well, g'day, Paul and Larry and guest in studio. How are you this evening? It's good to be here on a lovely Thursday evening in the summer.
We are fantastic, and Lance James has joined us in studio.
Yes.
Welcome, Lance, to the show. It's wonderful to have you in the flesh. It's very nice. It's very nice. You're very fleshy.
I deal with it every day.
Yeah.
Very fleshy.
Already too much information, Lance. Already too much information.
Very meaty.
Is this a family show?
Larry, do you have any announcements? You're going to be teaching
Vegas in like 3 weeks for network security.
Going back to Las Vegas.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
Hey, Paul, that makes two of us. I will be at Vegas.
You will be in Vegas?
Also.
That's right. Joff, we're going to have to go over to the Mandarin Oriental and go up to the bar at the roof there and have some nice cocktails.
Absolutely.
And make out. I mean,
Well, of course.
He said cock.
Joff's going to ask if I've got any Italian or Australian in me, and then
that's right.
Do I want any?
From there.
Vegas and
Vegas again.
Hackfest.
In Hackfest.
That'll be at Hackfest.
Hackfest.ca?
No, DC.
No, Hackfest.dc?
Sans Hackfest.
Sans Hackfest. That's right.
And DerbyCon.
I have to ask a question. So we have Security Vegas Week, which is DEF CON Black Hat, and then we just have Hackfest after. It's just we go back.
It's more. It's just
Yeah,
more.
pretty much.
Well, the Hackfest is DC, and then
Hackfest
but
is DC.
Sans has a conference in Las Vegas.
so you got to go to Vegas.
Usually in September.
Yep.
And a lot of us have had to go back. I've been to 1 year. Was it 2 years in a row that the Pen Test Summit way back in the day was in Vegas too?
Yep.
So there were years where I would take 3 trips out to Vegas. One for Hacker Summer Camp,
It's exhausting.
Black Hat DEF CON, one for Sans regular training, and then one for the Pen Test hacking
I
summit.
think there was a year I was in Vegas 8 times
Wow.
in a one
How do you-
one
Because
calendar
then
year
if you have a
period.
customer engagement in Las Vegas, you got to go back out to Las Vegas.
Yep.
The thing that I think what I noticed at Vegas, like every year, we all need to learn sign language, by the way, as a group. Because they always put us hackers where all we want to do is talk to each other.
Yes.
And they put us in these
In
loud
Vegas.
rooms in
Yes.
Vegas with like music pumping.
Right.
And I'm feeling like if we just learn sign language, we get 2 benefits.
so
we don't lose
we're
our
all-
voices at the
We're
end
all
of the
texting
of
each
the
other
third-
on our phones. And we're
Right.
like, wait,
Yo,
but
yo,
we
yo.
do that. What do we-
So I have
just need some,
we have
all
some
need
sign language.
neural interfaces. That's
So
what-
I have some sign language that I learned at DEF CON, and I think this is,
What does that mean?
and then I think that's
mean-
helicopter poop.
Fastback though, I did learn. Okay, so I did learn that eyebrows matter when sign language. So eyebrows up is a question mark, eyebrows straight forward is a demand. And my friend, he's deaf, and he asked his wife to marry him, and she's deaf, and so it was like he was nervous, so he forgot to put his eyebrows up. And when he asked her, it signed out as like "Marry me, woman." And so she's like, "What?" And he goes, "Oh," and then he puts the thing up. So he tells me the story, but it was really neat to learn. Like that's like those little things important. So, yeah. So
What if you only put one eyebrow up and the other one straight? That's what I'm wondering. What does that mean? Ambiguous craziness? Or?
I mean, if you're that talented, I'm sure you could probably invent your own dialect in sign language.
And anyone would marry you. Just a quick announcement. Speaking of Black Hat, we were at Black Hat. Well, I was at Black Hat. One of our developers, Katie, was at Black Hat. We had a booth. I wanted to thank everyone for coming by the Offensive Countermeasures booth at Black Hat in Innovation City. It was fabulous seeing all of you. Thank you for your feedback on the show. Lots of people love the show. Lots of great feedback about Enterprise Security Weekly. Lots of people saying they're just starting to listen to Startup Security Weekly. Some people were like, yeah, I knew you and John were like doing a thing, but I wasn't sure like what the thing was that you were doing. So you can email us, sales@offensivecountermeasures.com, or visit our website at offensivecountermeasures.com. Fill out the contact form, and we're happy to meet with you and tell you all about it. So with
Come on
that,
down to Innovation City.
well, we
where
were
the
there.
grass is
It was
green
fun.
and
It was fun. What did I say? It should be called Tomorrowland. I was like, innovation to like Tomorrowland. And like it kind of like is Tomorrowland, really. But that's a thing, a Disney thing.
Yeah, and Disney has expensive lawyers.
Yeah.
So Lance
It's more than the
James-
trademark on the tachyon. thing.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly. Lance James is here with us. He's a chief scientist at Flashpoint, where he heads up research and engages in thought leadership. Ooh, that's
I know, right? I sit around
Fancy.
thinking and leading.
Yes.
Oh my God, he's a bona fide thought leader.
All right.
Wow, we should all bow or something.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
He's not internationally known, but known to rock a microphone. I mean, no, he is. He is internationally known.
Intentionally.
I mean, intentionally
Internationally.
internationally renowned information security specialist with 15 years of experience and one of the founding forces behind CryptoLocker Working Group. Lance, it's wonderful to have you on the show. How did you get your start in information security?
I had a weird feeling you were going to ask me that today. So I was 8 and I met an Apple IIe.
Holy shit, dude. Me too.
Okay.
I was 8 and I met an Apple.
Are you adopted? Because that'd even be cooler, right?
No, I'm not. To my knowledge, I'm not
Anybody?
adopted.
Okay. So actually, this has to play with this because I've actually studied what drove me to get into it, right? So the biggest hacks I have is reverse engineering my own brain once in a while. So when I got into it, I was a musician. So I was playing violin and piano at 5, like serious musician. Like I was 2 and I wanted to play the violin, right? So this whole hacker thing didn't even come to mind, right? So I was at a music camp at 8, and when I stayed with a family, right? So my parents were like doing this thing in Canada in the summer, and they had their events, and I'm staying with this family, and I'm practicing music, and I practiced a lot, right? And then it was funny because then I got like the family I stayed with, they had an Apple IIe, right? And I was just mesmerized. I couldn't get off the thing. So it was a slight complaint because they were like, Lance is being unusual. He's not practicing as much. So
Did you write Hangman for it?
no, I played Hangman, but I did do something that was cool. So my parents ended up getting an Apple IIe because my mom's work, just by chance, it was given to her, and it had the color monitor.
Fancy. I didn't have a color monitor.
Yeah. So
I had the green. It was green.
the one I met
Yes.
was green,
Yes.
right? And I learned about Karateka and all the cool games. And then I've noticed, though, everybody with an Apple IIe, all the adults, the even had pirated games. It was like all their games were
what was
pirated.
what was the racing game?
There was Wavy Navy. There was
the
Hunter.
with the hunt. It's something. The
Yeah, the
theme,
Spy
song.
Hunter.
Spy
Yeah,
Hunter.
Spy
Thank you,
Hunter,
Spy
yes.
Hunter.
Loved
Yes.
that game, and I played that on that. This was in Oregon when I went to the camp. So then I come home. My parents got this like $3,000 Apple IIe with
Yeah,
the.
they were expensive.
Yeah,
I have the
expensive.
original receipt from my parents. Bought mine
Yeah.
used, and it was
I
like
still, my parents still have it. I'm trying to get them to deliver it to me. Right?
You're
Like,
lucky.
yeah.
See, I wish.
So it had the 512 accelerator card.
Yes, I had
It's
one
like
of those.
Crazy. Okay.
I snuck out under the Christmas tree to steal a gift and open that up, and it was the 5 and 12 like accelerator card, and I was still excited.
Yes.
That's how much of a started.
So cute story. Oop,
That's
oop.
okay.
All right, cool. You got to give me the gun one. I just want to look
You
like
like- you
this.
like-
Like
you
the
can-
gun
you
one.
can
It's
hold
just
the
like,
gun one.
Spy Hunter, right?
Yes.
So cute story. So being adopted, I was adopted at 2 years old, which is a little bit different than being adopted like, the minute you come out, right?
Right.
And it plays to, all the things that psychologists talk about in abandonment issues and all these other things. But there's also something that comes with it. It's a protector instinct. So I was 6 years old. I was in Renton. I lived in Renton Park, which is like Renton, Washington State.
Okay.
You guys remember the Green River Killer?
No.
Okay, so it was a serial killer in the 80s, popular in Washington State. This guy finally got, I think, arrested like after 25 years of this crap. So like about a few years ago, right? Some suburban dude just, with kids and all that stuff. But my mom is Canadian, and she would watch the news all the time. And this actually is a stereotype in Canada. They like watching our American news. It's just like entertainment. And so,
Well, it kind of is.
so what happened was I was kind of a loner 6-year-old, like 5-year-old, 6-year-old in kindergarten, right? And I kind of did my own thing, right? I was the kid that wouldn't nap but go play with a record player in the kindergarten class or whatever. And so I was walking across the fence that we had on the perimeter of the school. And the teacher comes up to me and she's like, "What are you doing?" And keep in mind I'm 6. And my mom had to tell me the story. I don't remember this. And because my mom got a call from the teacher about it.
Oh, this
so
is gonna be
she's like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm guarding the perimeter from the Green River Killer." And this is a 6-year-old. So this is what's in my head is I'm
Maintaining the
protecting.
perimeter, yes.
Yeah, and my son has this quality too. When he's just like, I want to be a police officer. He's got that protective quality, right? It's just like it's kind of heartfelt and it's cool. So when I was 8 and I met this computer. Hi computer, hello world.
Hello, computer.
I learned BASIC. I grabbed the Apple IIe manual that my mom had on it, and I learned about X and Y plotting, which was moving the mouse and
Yes.
joystick. Remember that square little joystick on the Apple
Yes.
IIe?
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
So I ended up like there would be a disk that I put in, and it had games. You type run hello, and it would
Yes,
run the games,
yes.
right? And I wanted to do it where it's like, for some reason, I had that protective mindset. So I wanted to lock my games up, right? So I actually learned BASIC when I was like 8, and I put in there you had to put in your right name. If it didn't know your name, it would go to my parents' stuff, and it wouldn't interfere. But if it knew my name, it would go to my games, right? And then, but before it did that, I also had it learned for passwords. So I learned the get car, actual basic Apple Basic get car, which is cool because actually technically it's a vulnerability in it because you don't have to press enter once you get the right password, right? But I'm 8. You got to start somewhere.
right,
You got to start somewhere. And then after that, it then had welcome to X-Men security systems, just needed some imagination, and then it would circle the numbers. And so I had marked with lead the joystick with numbers. And I actually turned the joystick into a combination lock to unlock the actual password because it was X and Y plotting, right? So I was just like, hey, actually I could use this as that. So I went one way, second way, and a third way, and then welcome to your games, Lance, right? And it was really cool. So this was me at 8 with this very protective detective. I was into Encyclopedia Brown and reading spy books and stuff like this, and so I had a very intrigue-ish nature and stuff. So it just kind of once you got a computer and you can program it, you can pretend whatever you want it to be.
The world is your oyster.
Correct. So that's how I got into it, right? And then
Awesome.
And then almost every high school year, I was getting, bugged in trouble for something. They were like, "We heard you cut the phone lines," or "We can't," it's like.
What did you get in trouble for?
I did change in 17. I changed grades and would charge money for it, and some kid ratted on me. 16, it was cutting lines because my friend was going to skip, and so I shut the phone lines down. Did not realize it was hooked into the fire. Things. 15, I think it was. I don't know if it was, what was that, 15? I can't remember what it was, but it was something I almost got in trouble with, again, computer related. But I also ended up helping the computer class, so that was cool.
At what point did you start being the good guy rather than...
Well, yeah, but about 18, because you get arrested for being the bad guy. And 2, in my head, I was still the good guy, right? You're just like, hey, this is this. Again, I also had to go to college and stuff. I was violin performance major and stuff. I ended up not actually ever finishing it, but I had to prep and do that. So I would say 18, 19 actually. So when I started my first company, Secure Science, I was 23. I had phishing was just starting to come out and be popular against the banks. And my friend Hikari, from TourCon, the guy who started Hikari, he introduced me to the San Diego FBI at the time. And because no one understood this stuff. And so I was like, I got to meet this guy and it was really cool because I ended up working together a lot on cool cases before anybody knew what was going on. And I get to be the cool, it feels good to be rock star to the FBI in San Diego. And you're like, oh, this is cool. They trust me. And back then it was very big deal because you're like, one, you didn't really do anything wrong, but you don't necessarily trust law enforcement either, right? So it was kind of like this, whoa, we're coming together, but we even had it where we set up a 2600 versus FBI paintball game. Actually, it was kind of cool in San Diego. I was doing my best to kind of bring some of the FBI guys to the 2600 meetings and kind of, hey, it isn't as bad from my experience. I mean, it doesn't mean everybody's an individual, but in those experiences, I had a good time.
So even early on, you seem to have recognized the importance of not just being technical, but the interpersonal skills as well.
Yeah, interpersonal is everything, man. Social scientist, right? So that's just something, it's one of the things I guess I'll go straight into now that I've learned. It's weird because I haven't realized until recently, people keep bringing up, hey, my interpersonal skills. I call it nerd whispering, right?
So, I like that.
When I worked at Deloitte, speaking of that, hi, Allison Nixon.
Hi, Allison.
And
hi,
she's
Allison.
also at Flashpoint. Yes. So, yeah, your brand is for Goatsy stickers, just to let you know the first thing they mention when I mention your name.
And I want some.
Right? So, yes. Next time I'll bring some. Next time I didn't know.
I ran out. I didn't know how you run out of Goatsy stickers. I don't know where they ended up. I don't want to know.
So yes. So actually, no. That's the really cool thing about it is leadership, right? So I've only learned myself lately. Like I said, reversing engineering is in my own brain. It's you ever have that where you're like, whoa. Every day you go, oh my gosh, I just learned something I didn't know I could do, or you can do. And this is a cool thing. This is the whole art of hacking, right? You're even if you're working on an exploit, or you're working on this, or whatever you're good at, you go, whoa, right? And you're always learning something. Well, and the same in the interpersonal side, it's always a cool whoa, right? Because the cool thing is again, and I think we had a conversation outside here where we're talking about when you track down bad guys, it's not about bits and bytes anymore, and you have to be conscious of that, right? You change lives. You could affect people, right? And we're obviously learning more and more how kinetics, cyber, or computers are these days, and how connected it is. But the interpersonal side has been very interesting because one of the things I guess it is that it's a combination of utilizing empathy with kind of the binary world, right? Because obviously one neat thing about the binary world is it's either off or on, and the humans are across the span. So it's a very interesting approach to take, and it's easy to really get caught up. For instance, I have a theory on kids that we keep labeling Asperger's, right? We keep saying hackers have Asperger's. It's not that. It's social development issues that we're on that all the time. We haven't even had a chance to develop. It doesn't mean they're necessarily autistic or Asperger. If anything, sometimes there's a disassociation issue. There's an escape there, and we get caught up on the addiction of that escape, not necessarily, look, I can't socialize. It's just I've never done it because I've been on this computer, and that's the world I socialize.
I've been socializing with a different mechanism.
Right, and those mechanisms require inference. So.
Along those lines, we get the question all the time, how do I get started in the field? How do I get started in security? What's your advice to our audience along those lines?
So always going to say, and I've always said this, always learn a programming language first, right? It doesn't matter. I'm not forcing you to say learn assembly or anything. I do recommend you getting the rudimentaries of C just because today's computing, we take it so much for granted. So when you and I grew up, and we all grew up, we had a cursor.
Speak for yourself about growing up, Park.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't still grow up. That's why I still use my Apple IIe. No,
everyone needs to go get an Apple IIe and learn how to program.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I just grew out.
No, but worst case, get a simulator. No, but we do take for granted today, right? The kids growing up today, and it's great, by the way, is that you get on there and you can just see this picture, right? But back for us, there was a cursor, and you're like, okay. Here's where the curiosity starts.
Yes.
How do we get this thing driving, right? It was like
everyone in early computing had to be a hacker.
Everybody had to be a hacker, right? So to operate the computer, yeah. Today, though, it doesn't. One of the things, and it's great about the millennial generation and everybody coming out of there is.
Wait, there's something great about the millennial generation?
Actually, there is. There is.
Okay,
good. It's a hit and miss.
Please enlighten me.
On the edge of my seat now, Lance.
It is a psychological thing. They have this need to what do you call it? Validate
Smoke
and
pot.
that too. But the ones that actually are in the workforce, in the workplace, they have this need to be validated and
What?
improved and. Yeah, but
sorry.
there's an advantage there because they are sponges right now, and that's a good thing, right?
Okay.
So, for instance, there are some of them that I've worked with that are like, they'll pick up the technical, but you can tell they're going to go probably on the business line. But it's good that they're taking the time. They're eager to do a lot, which is really cool, right? That part has been you got to learn how to tap into that, right? But if you can, their world, nothing's impossible. That's the really cool part. Like, I mean, and maybe that's just youth in general. But
And I might argue the ones that are motivated.
correct. Oh,
And
I will take
which of course-
persistence and motivation over talent any day
Which,
of the
of
week.
course, you're the only ones that you're hiring are the ones that motivate. you.
Yes, yes. I try to kill dead weight if possible. So, but yeah, so if I were to tell them, so start with a programming language. Today, the popular one is Python, right? If you can learn some rudimentaries of C because it teaches you about memory and actually how it's a high-level language for low-level concepts, that could be a good thing, right? That's always a thing. So there was a kid, hi Zach, that he's like 24 now or whatever, and these kids zipped through this. It's really great. So it's watching them just learn. But he went on his own to do Python and learn C, and I was like, whoa, that's cool, right? Because no one picks up C anymore. But it's good to see people do that because they're going to get a fundamental understanding of
I like
computing.
what you did there. See people do that.
Wow.
See what I did there? See what I did there? But you'll get a fundamental understanding of computing, which we don't like. There's a buddy of mine, Richard Johnson, well known and stuff, and he writes like kernels and driver level stuff. And I was talking to a Black Hat, and this guy goes into the level of like, so there's this like new piece in the processor, and he starts breaking all this stuff down, like total hardware hacking, and you're just like, you're a rare one, right? Because no one knows that
No one
stuff
does it
anymore.
anymore,
Unless you work
right?
at Intel or AMD, you don't know that stuff,
Yeah.
right? And so it was cool to see, and I'm like, wow, I haven't heard people talk about that in a long time. It was just really cool. So, So yeah, but
so
learn a
what other
language.
advice? So learn a
language. Find a mentor, and the reason why I say this, for instance, is because you're playing with tools that are dangerous, and wrong crowd, wrong click, wrong thing. Even if you go online,
Kind of like woodworking in that respect. I think it's important to find a mentor because the tools are really
It
dangerous.
is like a blacksmith. It's a trade craft, right?
yeah.
It's a trade craft. Zach, I was talking about just now, someone actually told me about him, introduced and said, he's playing with these tools. I want to, make sure he's around people that are playing with these tools on the right side of the world, right? Because you get online and you play with these tools, you don't know if that crowd is good or bad, and you don't know the line between that, and most people don't go around going, let me read the laws first,
Right. Yep.
So that's the thing. Find a mentor, someone who's well known and willing to mentor, and there's a lot of people out there that are willing to do that. The next one is one of the things that's very difficult is not giving up, right? So today's generation does sometimes give up a little easier. Again, you were talking about motivation. But persistence, okay, so hackers, when I break it down to the people side of the hacker, it's curiosity, creativity, and persistence, right? That's the makeup of a hacker. If it's not for you, it's okay, right? Like, so if you're playing and dabbling with computers and it's just not for you, that's okay too. Hacking doesn't have to be down to computing, right? But one of the things that is if it is, and you've got a mentor and you've got languages that you're learning, start also going to meetups to meet other people. And the reason why is your career counts, right? So if you're, I meet a lot of people that are in like Oklahoma and they're in Arkansas and they're in like some areas they just don't have any reach out. But if they have a car or they can get out somewhere, maybe to their nearest metro city and go hang out with some kind of meetups, like whether it's programmers or 2600 or whatever, that circle of people will get you the opportunities you need, right?
Or OWASP or any of those.
And then there's also some online meetups these days that you can start. I think people are starting to do hangouts and stuff. And with a mentor, they can also go out you on what IRC to hang out with or people to talk to and stuff. But it really is. Ironically, I'm telling us hackers to socialize, but it really is important for them to socialize, or they will just be kind of stuck in a room and wondering where their career went, right?
Yeah.
One thing I think hackers knew from the beginning of the early days, was we need attention or we won't get jobs. So this is where all the stunt work comes from. Like, look what I hacked today, and that actually helped. If you look at like the champions of like the old school original hackers, they all have. They're at the top of their peak because people knew who they were, right, and stuff like that. So, and then, of course, if you can, make it to Black Hat or DEF CON and meet more people, right? But those are the big ones, really. It's just kind of like, failures of your best friends. So when you screw up or you can't get it or you don't figure it out, just keep going at it. Just, I mean, the whole point was, it's the playing field is even nowadays, right? It's not like we can't. Most people can get a computer, right? Most people can learn on Wikipedia. Most people can learn on a GitHub, or they can learn everywhere. It's not like there's a class system with hacking, right? We're all here for our brain. We don't have this diversity issue or these.
And there's so much information available now.
Yes, and it's even playing field. And all you do is, I mean, the rule is just bang, 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 bang onto it until you can basically figure it out and stuff. And if you don't, call up a buddy and they can teach you and help you. So,
Lance, at some point in your career, you started analyzing malware and started tracking the bad guys. How did you come across that kind of line of work? Or was it just curiosity in the beginning?
So I think it's a really good question. So I've always so before I got into that line of work, I was kind of a network security engineer, right? And I would see the stuff coming on the IDS, and back then, I hate to say it, but it was those days I could put my feet up, right? And like, okay, the perimeter's good.
Right.
NIMDA finally comes out. Code Red comes out. You're like, okay,
you're dating yourself now.
Now this is defining incident response.
I know how old you are because if I was 8 on an Apple IIe and you were 8 on Apple IIe,
yeah,
I know how old
my
you are.
birthday's next week too, so I'm getting older.
Happy 40th.
Yeah, shut up. I'm 38. I'll be 38. I'm still 37. I'm holding on to it. So how I got into it. So it's really interesting. So I founded I2P, which is like a Tor network, right? So in 2001, I was into crypto. That was my thing. And my math. I was at work. I had my feet up as a network security engineer, literally. 2001, and I was like, I want to do some crypto. I played with Freenet. Remember Freenet, Ian Clark's thing, and so I started playing with that, doing a little bit of. I wasn't much of a Java guy, so it was kind of uncomfortable, but I tried to develop a little bit for it. And then I'm like, it takes 24 hours to get me a message here. It was a time-based archival system. It made sense. And I'm like, screw this, man. I want some IRC and some anonymity, right? So I started studying like dining cryptography's problem and all these like interesting anonymous, like basically if people talk about Bitcoin now, they don't know anybody about David Chaum. If you want to learn about some of the history of what really, and it's funny because he doesn't get mentioned in when related to Bitcoin, but look up David Chaum, Chaum, and you'll find the e-voting systems, the hash cash concepts, like blind signatures in crypto, all these really cool, hard problems, right? And I sucked at math in high school because I hated my teachers. But they said there's actually a study that says males tend to get into math around their 20, 21, 22, and it starts getting in their peak. So, and I was like getting into self-taught, starting to learn big numbers theory. I was reading the Handbook of Applied Cryptography. I was bringing applied to cryptography. By the way, the handbook, once you get past applied and get the basics, that is a great book. And so anyways, so I was like, I was on to something, and then it was like 4 a.m, I was asleep, and I woke up. I literally woke up, and it was like just spinning around, and I was like drawing on napkins, and I said, I got it, and I knew how to design this, so I started writing it in C. So it was crypto, and then finally we got everybody anonymous. Like, don't have your IPs, I don't have this and that. And then I started getting interested in the author analysis. Who am I talking to, right? Like more of a Sherlock Holmesian type perspective, like, I would do studies like, well, if you banged on the computer, your left-hand preference, or you're a visual, auditorial, or kinesthetic learner based on how often you might say, I see what you're saying versus I feel what you're saying, I hear what you're saying. And so I started studying neuro-linguistic programming, not the crappy art of seduction stuff, but the actual language semantics that was taught in the 70s. And I was starting to apply that and go, can I figure out who you are without an IP address? Can I figure out what gender you are? What kind of, what style? Is there a profile I can build around it? So it became interesting to me. And then so at the time, I2P, I was still IIP at the time. But I was also talking to some people about starting a company, maybe like a secure communications, instant messaging platform or something. I was like kind of bored with the job I had, and I knew I needed to start a company. I just didn't know what it was. I remember being around a bunch of people, and then it hit me so big. Not so big came out. A phishing attack came out. I did a talk at TorCon 2002 about I2P, right? And then this PhD came up to me and said, hey, you want to break some crypto? And it was all Stego stuff. And was watching covert communications and spam by terrorist organizations. So I kind of got into tracking that down. And this guy kind of taught me forensics, like how to apply, almost like it was kind of a intelligence project, but I was on the crypto cracking part, and he was showing me the forensics. And all that just became, it was kind of this like new, wow, and I'm 22, sucking on information, right? So, and I'm hanging out with a PhD and got his attention. I'm like, my ego's up, right? I'm feeling good, and so So basically, he started going into forensics, and I started studying how he did it and learned things like that. So kind of took on a mentor, and then from that point, we started applying that both in the tracking spam and classification. That's where we kind of started that whole forensics and tracking bad guys down. But it was kind of scaring me because then by 23, I had kids, and I didn't want to be in counterterrorism at that time. And my name's, I didn't think about OPSEC or any of those things, right? I bought a house, and it was like everything's on there. And I'm like, you know what? I think I'm going to let you guys do this. But I learned a lot from it. So I started a company around that. Which focused on, like, phishing came out in one of the emails, and the same PhD and I started tracking it down. And we did the same techniques, and we actually found the tester in Delaware. We found all of the web bug logs that were actually showing how many it was hitting. People hadn't seen this kind of phishing against these banks, and this was 2003. We contacted the bank and said, hey, for free, give us the hard drives. We just want to know, curious, like, we'll help you out. And they were really pushed off because there was an insider at the bank helping out the bad guy, right? And so we kind of were like, well, okay, if you don't help us, Semantic, owning security focus at the time, is willing to pay us $1,000 to write a forensic analysis on this. And so we wanted to keep our names anonymous because these are Russians we were dealing with, right? And so I was like, it was Squirrel and Dr. Moose. And then, like, Security Focus was like, we're not going to publish a paper with that nicknames on it, right? And so I'm like, how about Secure Science Corporation, which was my first company? They're like, that'll work. And so actually how I started my company was putting this article out, rushing to put just some kind of basic logo on the website.
Oh, jeez.
Right? Like, literally getting paid to market myself. Didn't realize this was going to happen and go down this way. And then it got slashed out of that week. And then our first customer, who was the United Nations, called us on the week and said, do you guys do audits? And we're like, right now we do everything. Right? So basically we became, like, known for the company that could track down phishers, and we started taking the same spam classification. Phishing's just another form of spam. So we started moving it over to kind of when you hear about APT 1, 2, 5, we were doing PG, what we called PG, and this is 2003 before APT groups were out there. We had PG01, which was the hang-up team, PG number 2, which was the city image group. And we had their schedules. We had PG. We was like, PG number 2. Well, there was someone screaming on an anti-phishing list, and it was a bank. And I said, yeah, they hit you on Wednesdays. Actually, they hit eBay on Tuesdays. They hit Citibank on Thursdays. We had this down to
how much of it was statistical analysis, and how much it was like the behavioral and language analysis that you?
Oh, so that was interesting. So
and how much was it infiltration?
All of this. Just all of it, guys.
33, done.
Go. Yeah, exactly, right? And that 1% for coffee. So it started out with classification, because to understand any kind of pattern, you need to get a handle on it. People keep reacting. So we decided, let's stop reacting, right? And I learned from the PhD how to do statistics and classifications and stuff. And I got my rubber stamp fake PhD for that, right? Like, so I was sponging on him, and I was learning that stuff and how to do classifications. So he was teaching me a lot of actually early ML and early probabilistic writing, right? I was interested in language. He was interested in language. So we started then applying, like, we also analyzed the spam content.
You did great at Black Hat this year. Every vendor says they have machine learning.
Oh, I know, right? Well, this was before they probably called it that. Same with before we called it threat intelligence, right? Like, I just called it tracking down hackers, right? So it was funny, though. So we started with classification. What that did was allow us to kind of have folders of kind of a view, right? Because imagine if you mind map it, right? You can kind of go, okay, this actor's doing this actor's doing this actor's doing this, and you get like a view. And then once you start looking and kind of going into the depth, you see the pattern. Like when I said they hit an eBay, or they hit this bank, or they hit this bank on these days, you literally just saw this pattern because you would be classifying it and dropping it into that pool. And you go, oh, that's PG number 2. Okay. And we'd write filters in code that could just pick off these spams. All we did was have spam collectors that literally recognized both in the headers and in the content, right? They had certain type of headers, they had certain type of language, and then they certain type of content. And you hear about, like, EFF's got that panel-click stuff, and how they do it is, like, some of it was entropy. So we did it off of like measuring certain entropy in the languages. We measured also n-grams and things like this. And it didn't scale like it does today. We didn't have these huge machines, but it wasn't that much stuff that we were picking out very precise groups, right? We didn't need to see every piece of spam. Right. So we started there. And then I started getting into web application security at the same time because I was forced to write a book called Phishing Exposed. But basically I had to learn web AppSec because I also knew what was going to happen on that. I could see these trends where once they really get their hands around that, they're going to do these attacks. So part of writing the book was the research. But then I also, like, through that, learned how to infiltrate their stuff, right? And then the language piece came in both a combination of us classifying spam because we had to look at language types and stuff. And then we would actually even go down to one spammer, and I think I put it in chapter 1. It was living in the LA area, likely, or at least a Raiders fan, because he wasn't spamming on Raiders home games. Right.
Jeez.
Yeah.
That's
So this
awesome.
is like how we got to this. And now, if I
Like
have to,
maybe even a Raiders season ticket holder type thing.
right, exactly, right. So we were like figuring out things like these weird, like more like I guess it's more compared to like Sherlock Holmesian type of approaches. But it was more about get and understand your data first, and then we were able to do the human eye, because people talk about automating intelligence, and it's like. It's not about just automating. Like, you go through the intelligence life cycle, no matter where you go, no matter what year it's going to be, you're going to always have humans involved. You're going to always have automation. I mean, it's just figuring out what you can do with the patterns that you have seen. Can you use that to automate or feed a system that can do it, right? It's not magic in that sense. It's actually a lot of work, and it's kind of like trudging up a lot of dirt and piling it up. But the difference is that you finally got a tractor, and it's helping you do that, right? So. And then we got into infiltration. So this is where I had Hikari introduced me to some of the FBI buddies so that I had oversight. But I had all these crazy ideas with no knowledge of the law yet, right? Like, not in a real way. But it was fun because I got to hang out with the lawyers on their side and go, I got 10 crazy ideas to like hack into these dudes. And they're like, yeah, we can't do that. We can't do that one. We can't do that one. So just to get to, as many people might hate the FBI, they do spend a lot of time trying to protect people's privacy on this. They went by the books on this stuff. And then they're like, we might be able to do this. Here's the contentions. And so we would go back and forth. The fun part, and this is that interpersonal stuff, it goes back to that, was learning how to find ways that we could be progressive. Now, this is 03, 04, where this is what we call offensive counterintelligence, but there was no book on this yet, right? Especially on the cyber side. So we would do everything we could so that we didn't break the law, but what were clever ways? And one of the things was malware. Around 2003, I found, and I'll give you the story of how I got into the infiltration. Same year, I was operating at a very higher speed than this. So it was like, same year though, people talk about information sharing. I finally met the guy that actually last year that we did this this whole thing. But 2003, there was a ISP in Florida that was getting a lot of bad guy stuff down there, and I had spotted it out because I was tracking. You know how I said I was classifying stuff, so I was classifying domains along with these spams. So I'm like, this guy, KarlMarx.ru, okay, Leningrad. Notice the pattern, by the way. Gorbachev.ru. The good old days. They don't like the new democracy, right? So there was a pattern there too. But it was all pointing over to this box, and I said, hey, I'll give you free analysis on this, any signatures I build or anything like that, if you can get me that hard drive, right? I said, this is all bad, so there's no privacy invasion here. This is just bad. Check your TOS if you can shut it down, right? So basically, he sends me the hard drive, or copy of the hard drive, right? I start analyzing it, which is when I really got into forensics, because that was just fun, right? It was a base camp. And when I say base camp, think of an intranet on a corporate network. Well, it's their version of it, and it's bad guys.
Wow.
So in 2003, I get a real big view of infiltrating an entire operation out of Russia. And I'm talking their communications, their Western Union stuff, the pictures of who they are. There was a cat. I got a cat with money hanging around on the floor. I was like, definitely the cat did it. But literally addresses. There was mafia people that were actually pushing on young kids, like 16, 17-year-olds. These mafia guys had guns. There was you learned the culture. You're like, okay, it's not again, like I said, not everybody grows up evil, right? It's like the environment was a survival environment, right? And so and back then in 2003, I put out a report. Back then it was super secret and stuff, but now it's they were infiltrating networks that we're not as surprised today, but I'm talking missile systems, major banks, inside these banks in 03, when no one knew about this malware, this infiltrating type malware, exfiltrating malware. So. And I'm talking lists long. We literally, when I did the forensics, I'm like, here is everything they've been in, and I had all their data. And so I tried to send it over to all the banks, and I got kicked off the anti-phishing working group because they're like, we think he's a phisher. And so I had the FBI call and say, hey, no, he's actually above board. What he's doing is legal. And so it was just from a forensics gig. But I'm realizing I started getting the malware. I learned how it worked. That's how I got into the malware part. It was called Burbu at the time, 2003. And so I got this copy of malware. I got different versions of it on their base camps because they compiled different versions. I even had source code access to some of it, and it was really cool.
They were doing all this activity on one server?
Yeah, well, yeah, it was like a base camp. It was their VPS that they all kind of communicated on, right?
And but think about it. It's 2003.
That's true. I was going
Right.
to say, are hackers even that sloppy?
it was-
Well, the larger groups aren't that sloppy.
Right, and it wasn't even VPS back then because we didn't really do the VPS. But like, think of it as like a group VPS, right? And they didn't think anybody was going to notice it, right? And so I happen to have a gold mine, which I'll say when I started my company, competitively put me ahead a little bit. I really got to understand the inside working of a phishing and malware group, right? Which no one had at that time. Everybody was like, okay, we're seeing it from the outside, right? So this gave me a little bit of an edge, I'll admit. But it was cool because I kept information sharing with stuff, and I started realizing if I start information sharing with them, I could also do it with them. And back then, no one was complaining about this stuff because it was just raw bad, right? It's not a mix. I didn't get hacked. I'm not messing with someone's privacy. It's just that hard drive is owned by a bad guy. If it's not supposed to be on your network and you don't want to be on your network, then you can shut it down and I can sign up as your security company that does your forensics, right? And I'll do it for free, right? There's rules you can play there, and so that was actually really cool time. So it got me way into it opened my eye. It was like one of those mind blown, right? Like you're like, wow, this is crazy. So basically, within the same year, I got into classifying, tracking, doing stuff, and then also doing forensics and infiltration, because then I started learning how their malware worked, and a lot of times they had logs on public things that people didn't know about. This is early days, or I knew where the logs were or what they would be called, even if then they were world readable, but the directory may not be open. Now by law, that's not a violation. That's a public website. So I set up scripts I set this thing up called Tacklebox. Get it? Tacklebox. I would do things like IPID inference too, like the numbers. A lot of them were sequential back then, so I could tell how much traffic hit the phishing site. I could tell if there's multiple proxies, they would all forward over the same IP IDs, so I could tell how many different motherships were behind things. I was
going to say, did you have a list of everything that they had compromised?
Yes, I had. Yes, I did. I had pictures of them. I had a list of them compromising. I'm talking. I had it done in industry, so government was a huge list. Financial, energy, and this was 03. All of this stuff has been patched. We called every single person actually.
Right.
But this was big back then. No one knew it. We didn't do the whole let's put this out like an APT1 report or anything like that. We put it out to the government, the industry, and the people who needed to know
help
about
contacting all those people that have been owned.
Right, and two, it was not appropriate to do a marketing maneuver on that, right? This is this was scary as heck, right? This blew our minds, and I can only imagine. Like I said, people were trying to kick me off of a working group because they didn't understand how I had this information, right? So it opened up a light that was just really on everybody, right? We were like, oh, we thought this was just the beginning. This stuff, these guys have been around a while, and this is like espionage, right? But it's also cybercrime, right? There was money involved, all of that stuff. There's not too far, right? When you think about espionage, money, ideology, coercion, or ego, right? So it's fun. So I just started making a whole living about figuring out how to infiltrate their malware and pull the data out of it, whether it's log files or this and that. I started learning the laws so that I wouldn't break any laws, but it was an offensive countermeasure, right?
Yeah,
It was. Speaking of, hey, free plug, guys.
Thank you.
But it was early days, and only till 2006, after my book came out, people started going, "Oh, recovered credentials. I need that service." Before, they were like, "How'd you get this?" Right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, no, are you extorting me? Oh, no, this data's free. We can't charge you for your own data, right? But I learned all of these lessons along the way, things that we do normally in cyber intelligence, and so it was funny. There was one bank, I won't say their name, but they were progressive. They were the ones that got it right away, and they're like, "Let's talk," and that was cool to see, and that kind of helped validate what we're doing.
What was your company that
This was Secure Science Corporation back in the day, SSC.
But your primary mission back then?
Counterintelligence, man. It was hacking hackers, but in a way that we could, all that happened was originally I started the company, like I said, off that semantic forensics on phishing, and I realized I just went with it. And then now everybody called me for forensics and phishing and hey, all the banks that did know what we were doing were like, we need your help. Oh my gosh. And so we ended up becoming a early threat, it wasn't called threat intelligence then. We didn't even know what to call it. I remember actually being on the phone with Wells Fargo when I actually started the name of the product. They called and they goes, "How much is this?" And we're like, "We'll get back to you in a week." What's it called? SLAM? Secure Legal Action Management. Right? I didn't know what the frick to call it, right? I'm just like, okay, that sounds cool. Let's go. This is how this company comes, is that we started solving a problem, and then the banks were coming at us. And we're like, oh crap, it's time to move on this. And so I literally quickly hired a business development guy right after that. And I was like, I need your help putting all this stuff together. I don't know what to do. Because all I was in the world of is just like doing this stuff. And usually I would survive off pen tests and things like that. I knew how to do that. But then it became basically a counterintelligence company or cyber counterintelligence company. I've never really called it threat intelligence until the name kind of came out, but it was always to me cyber counterintelligence, right? Which is just cyber as a domain, land, airspace, sea, and it's counterintelligence in that world. So we started getting all these banks, and then we started getting, like, obviously I had FBI oversight, which was great, which is probably the best way to start a company when you're messing with, like, figuring out where to go in the seas of, like, unknown territory. And then we ended up getting, like, massive cool government contracts as well and stuff like that. And it was actually cool because I ended up, like, the people I got to work with when I was young, I had, like, Michael Haley, I don't know, from the Malware Analysis Cookbook. He started kind of there as well. Like, he was a sysadmin before that, and then he started doing his first reversing was the Zeus paper we did. I'm
curious, so what happened to the company?
I got a divorce, and that happens. 2009, I got a divorce, right? So, yeah.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries.
But now, so my question for you is today.
Yeah.
Right. Fast forward to today. Can most organizations take advantage of some of this cyber intelligence, or is it targeted to specific industries and organizations that are tall enough to ride the ride?
So that's what we're trying to change, and I don't want to overdo the Flashpoint thing, but we are trying to change that a little bit. So
so what is Flashpoint?
Flashpoint is it's business risk intelligence, but it's a similar model that I was telling you about with the secure science, except it's 10 years to 15 years later, and it's like mature and ready to be. It's the playing field different, and they have done the reason why I joined is I was on the advisory board, and I was kind of just kind of floating around after Deloitte and stuff, and I was just kind of like, we'll see what I want to do, do speaking here or this or that, or just kind of figure it out. But I liked being on the board, and I was like, what they're doing is really, really cool. And so then I decided I want to play ball here. I want to come in and do some cool stuff with you guys. Like, I want to start the R&D department. So what they're doing, and it's funny because we call it business risk intelligence, which is kind of like someone asked me the other day, we were at Black Hat, and I'm going to totally brag here, but it was true. Like, we got, like, all of our major clients were, like, just bragging about us at this party. They were just like, man, we're just really, like, I've never been working at a company where, usually you got to have some, like, bad stuff. They're like, I really like this. I'm like, wow, this is good to hear some of these big names, like, do this. And I was like, wow, this is it because the mission, the vision that we're doing, it's not about, like, we're just trying to service our clients. It really is a pure mission, right? We're trying to protect people. But what they do is they kind of named the market that we've been doing the whole time. So people call it cyber threat intelligence these days, but that is only very limited, right? When you think about it, you think like Soltra, or you think about these products that go into your operational centers like SOCs, and they allow you to, like, react. And they always talk about indicators of compromise. Well, when I think about advanced persistent threats, I don't usually see advanced persistent threats repeating their pattern, because that's why they're advanced.
Right.
And so when you get this, the basic, if someone sends you IOCs and you put it in, you either got hit or you're not going to get hit. And that's all you got. That's the lifetime of that information.
Well,
right?
people want to use the cyber threat intelligence to learn about before they get hacked.
Correct, but it's not. But the problem.
It's not that, right?
Yeah,
I had an issue when I read stuff about that.
Well, so it should be that, but it isn't, right? I always say, what's the point of intelligence if it's always after the fact, right? If you're not really learning anything, right? And the idea of intelligence is when you see threat feeds, that's not intelligence, that's information. Until analysis comes in, that becomes intelligence. You have to be able to make a decision, right? And that requires both human and automation. Automation cannot help you, make all decisions in the world, right?
Right.
So what we've done is this model actually has been across the board. So, like, Flashpoint kind of started out similar to secure science in some ways, the counter-terrorist side, right? They were modeling into looking at bad guys in the deep and dark web that are focused on physically hurting people, right? Now, you think about that, that's in the cyber realm, but it affects their physical security. It affects across the board to their decisions. If they're the Olympics, they got to think about all of those things, right? So something like that, when you think about it, is what real business risk or even organizational risk intelligence is that you're on the cyber domain, but it doesn't mean it's limited to cyber.
For something on the Olympics, that makes sense that they would sign up
for
that
but
kind of service. We
do it across the board for all of our financials, right? They don't think about IPs and this and that. Think about fraud, cards, this and that, right? So those are not really those. everything has an active response to it, right? Like they shut that card down, they shut this out. If their account went out and this and that.
No,
that's
and that
simplified,
makes sense.
right?
But I think people try and use it to. This is kind of a blanket statement, right? They use the cyber threat intelligence, regular threat intelligence, and all these things to say,
to dilute,
tell me about what's owned in my network,
right?
And I'm like, no, hold on, let's back up.
That's threat. That's more like threat profiling, or I don't know, vulnerability assessment. I don't know. So
you can agree, disagree, but I always tell them, like, look, if you're looking at these external factors to tell you about what's wrong in your internal network, I'm like, why don't you just look on your internal network?
So I've actually written blogs on this. There was literally no.
I'm not crazy.
I speak on this all the time.
This is the I'm already fucked intelligence.
Yeah. So there is literally a blog I wrote on DNS classification about last year, and it was a series I wanted to start, but the company I was doing it with, we canceled the blog idea. But it was called Know Your Network series, and it was before buying threat intelligence. And so I even said it at Deloitte. When I worked at Deloitte, I would be like, "You're not ready to buy from us. You need to know what's going on in your own network, right? It's like the best intelligence you'll ever get is from your own network. But people don't even understand their own DNS. They don't understand if dynamic DNS is going out of their network. Like, how many corporate networks are you going to have dynamic DNS even popping out of your network without understanding why? It's either a developer going to their home, and you're still going to wonder about why that is, or it's some badness, right? And so when you think about that stuff, like, and we're talking standard, like you could take an Elk, Elasticsearch, Kibana setup, and you could take about a month and figure out your DNS very quickly, right? It's just if you kill all the politics, obviously. I'm giving that number based on no politics, right? But in general, you can take a couple guys and learn it. Plus, it's a fun project, and it feels good to go. Okay, I know what's going on over network, and you could literally see your daily, like, okay, that's classified as that, classified again, spam classification, now DNS classification. It's all about knowing your own data, right?
Absolutely true. I couldn't agree more. I mean, I was just thinking in some of the work that I've done with Paul and OCM and stuff. That's exactly it. You got to focus on the data analytics. You got to know the environment. You got to. People have kind of turned off that brain to that stuff, and they're missing it. They're completely missing it.
Yeah, and
I think you've kind of backed up the philosophy behind our company. It's awesome.
Yeah, and see how you did that to me. No, but the good news.
I led you right into that.
No, but I mean, we work in the same world. Your company's called Offensive Countermeasures. I think we definitely come from the same cloth in that way.
Thank you. Yeah,
so,
I tend to ash on myself like a lot.
You're looking pretty ashy today. So.
Thank you.
At least there wasn't a hole there, because then he's not an asshole.
Yeah, he's not an asshole. But here's where Flashpoint, and you're probably right. So in the long term, we tend to take mature clients because they have been. They have to be.
Arcangelo, right? I'm going to channel him. Like, how tall you have to be to ride the ride.
Right.
The companies
because by the time you get to us, it's strategic intelligence. You're able to make a decision about your organization.
But not just make a decision, but what you alluded to before is they act on that intelligence.
Correct.
And a lot of the companies that I see that are getting intelligence are like, well, I spend a lot of time analyzing it, but we don't do a whole lot of acting on it. Right. So I'm like, why?
So why'd you bother analyzing?
And we get metrics we force metrics from our customers. So they give us a feedback, because feedback loop and intelligence is so important. It's one of the most important. So they come back. We kind of have high touch relationships with our clients. So they'll come back and say, we took action on this percentage, and so we can clean up our act. Yeah, right. We encourage like what we don't know, the mistakes we make, and the good things as well. Like obviously that's what I see. That's a side comment.
You're very animated, Lance. We love it.
Yeah, sorry. But the side comment is, even in pen tests, when you do those, you should also say what's good about what they did well, right? So having that balance is great. But really, real intelligence is a bidirectional relationship, right? So I can send you stuff, and if I don't know what it did for you, then I'm just guessing.
Yeah.
Right?
You have to apply I should back up. You can get intelligence, and if you apply context to it, help you back up what you're already learning inside of your own network, which is always my recommendation. People are insistent about using threat intelligence, and even we're sponsored by a threat intelligence company. They agree with me. They're like, that's how we want people to use it, as like another, we call it a perspective on the data that you're already collecting internally.
And as I say, you can never have enough intelligence, right? So it doesn't mean you go just Flashpoint or just you guys or just us. Right. We serve a certain purpose. Another thing that's different from us, though, is we are very precise-oriented, right? People talk about the deep and dark web. We don't get everything. We get what's precise and focused, right? And we don't deliver everything to our clients. That's another thing is dilution, right? You load up those SIMs with so much data, and they're just taxing and chugging along, and you have to spend more licenses just to get up, more commodity hardware on it. But it's more about like like when we talk about that decision, getting that decision means that we have to know our customer and know how to actually deliver it very precise, and that is this back and forth. So then we create what's called PIRs, right? Priority Intelligence Requirements, which allow us to understand what their needs are across the board.
And you've done this for a long time.
Yeah, this is my thing.
This is like you described your whole history behind that. So what is there value in looking at like what the trends are today, or is that not going to be specific enough for most organizations? Like what actionable intelligence can you give us in terms of trends that you're seeing today?
Well, yeah, for instance, the ransomware, right? What happens when it's not about a ransom anymore? So what a lot of people are misunderstanding about ransomware is right now it's about money, but really when it comes down to it, let's speak of our age again, it's a logic bomb, right?
Yep.
It's simply a logic bomb, right? And in the payload happens to be pay me. Right? F you pay me, right? So in the case of that, though, the psychological aspect of it is I see so many people lying about paying the ransom because it got hit on their work computers. They happen to be a CTO. They can't, that messes their ego up, right? And they'll pay the $300 just to like make it go away, and they don't want to like get in trouble at work, and they worried about fire. Now imagine you put the same kind of psychological pressure, or even more, especially when you see things like the DNC hack and the power of influence that's going on. Influential hacking is the trend. Psychological, basically PSYBER, cyber. But basically psychological operations are starting to play into this. The bad guys are figuring out that people, they can bend them because they aren't bits and bytes. They are people. And so what happens when it is a coercion technique that allows someone to commit an insider threat thing or open up an ACL because they'll get fired otherwise, or they're scared, or they get blackmailed, or they this and that. We saw the Ashley Madison. So we're seeing like hints of these things, but nothing fully operationalized in a strategic manner yet. But that's where it will go.
But we label it hacktivism because it makes a big splash in the news, and we label that
hacktivism as teenagers.
And what you're talking about is very much more targeted and a lot more scary.
And it is true hacktivism, because if you're talking about hacktivism, the definition, I2P, inventing that was hacktivism. Why? Because it was a political statement writing software, right? It had influence with the software. The hacktivism today is a bunch of teenagers. I'm just going to be honest. They got to have some reason to live at the time, right? Keeps them going, right? They need, most of the time, it's truly motivated by attention-seeking behavior, right? Which is fine. That's what it is. But let's stop trying to make it out like that they're truly motivated by ideology. It's like that it's kind of like if you do, you're going to be looking in the wrong places in the first place, right? Even Snowden, people feel like he's a hero, but at the same time, it wasn't all ideology that has motivated him. There were other things too. So
is that so he could sell more of his cell phone specialty thing?
Yeah, I'm just saying there's more than meets the Transformers. There's more than meets the eyes in this story. But what I'm getting is same with the teenagers, right? Just because they hacked and said we did this and we have a manifesto doesn't mean that's all of the reasons why they did it, right? We're talking behavioral profiling, right? So in the same thing with hacktivism, actually, what if the Russians did hack the DNC? That's political hacktivism.
Right.
It is foreign intelligence through a foreign intelligence model of doing it. It's reflexive control. It's a bunch of cool, really, like if you want to really scare yourself, go read about Russian psychological operations, like in reflexive control. But that influential power that they have is they're literally twisting a political election right now. That is one of the most dangerous things you can do. It's the leadership of our country.
And so do you think that is so-called state-sponsored, or do you think that's being done in the benefit for a company, or there are other individuals involved that profit for a particular outcome?
In their case, I won't speak to the expertise on it, but I think in this case, I think America is very fickle as a country and as a group, and we're very vulnerable to domestic and foreign influence very easily, right? And so I'm not surprised if we find out that this was a Russian thing, or even if it was another country, right? That this has been going on for a long time, right? For instance, if you take a hypothetical conjecture here is APT1 report comes out. It suddenly puts the attention on China and Russia is spying. Well, Russia and China don't want that attention, but Obama's suddenly pushing a shift over to cyber, and the next thing you know, our industry becomes mainstream. Good for us, great, right? But you remember you're dealing with spies, and spies like to be quiet, and they don't like to be like shined upon, right, and stuff. Thus, when you look at like all of the way fast forward to the OPM breach, why it was so aggressive, Bill, because everybody's shining light on them, and they needed to get the information they needed, so they moved faster. But our actions of APT1 could have also propelled and caused this, speed up, right? And another piece is there's an optional belief that Snowden was like a sleeper or was paid by a couple countries. Take a guess which two ones, right? So yeah, right. Where's he living right now? So.
And where did he end up before that?
Correct, right? Hong Kong, Russia, yeah, China, right?
I mean, you get into a conspiracy theorist state, which is,
The point is that has psychological influence, whether it's true or not, and that's my point, right? It plays into the confusion. You want to go to war with America? How do you do it? Make us not trust our own government.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So we start shutting down in the inside, right? So these are the things that you have to be aware of that. Even if this is all just junk, and like I said, it's hypothetical conjecture.
Yeah, it's conjecture.
It's conjecture, but it could, it isn't impossible these days.
So recently, FireEye fired or let go 300 or 400 employees. In the article referenced that it was because of ransomware that people were doing it because it's cheaper to pay the ransom than it is to go hire FireEye or Mandiant to clean up the breach.
Fire from that perspective. Okay, I thought you meant like you were laying off, and I'm like, wait.
But one of the things the article said was that
interesting.
One of the other economic factors is that
That is a bad play.
Yeah.
Hey, we can get people fired from a certain company.
No. The firing was done by FireEye themselves,
right.
not from another organization.
So FireEye laid off 300 people.
Okay,
300
they did.
people.
So I did understand.
And they say that the reason was that ransomware was cheaper to pay off the ransom than it would be to hire FireEye.
And so less
Mandiant.
people were actually hiring FireEye, and so they had to lay off for that.
Their sales are down.
That bills. Yeah.
The other reason they gave that sales were down was that state-sponsored hacking isn't as frequent today. Do you agree with that?
I'd say that depends on what you're targeting. Mandiant and FireEye were very specialized in China, right? So when you're, again, we were talking field of view of intelligence. That was their niche. That was their thing. And again, all due respect to FireEye, and they probably have other areas and stuff like this. And these are all suppositions. But when it comes down to it, I'd say the China Cyber Peace TM trademarked Obama thing that happened with the Chinese president, and them coming together did put China into a little bit of a shift, right? So internationalization is a big issue.
Did they sign a treaty?
They didn't sign a treaty, but you got to remember
a handshake.
So again, let's go back to the pattern. So the pattern was OPM breach. Then shortly after, China's stock market was tumbling, right? Coincidence or not, again, we can have another conspiracy theory. We're not going to say it is.
Right.
But that did happen about a month later, right?
And this may be integrating into one of the theories that we talked about on the show a while back, in that now OPM happens, China's got all the information they need. They don't need a lot more. So all of these renegades, all the mercenaries are like, well, I've also got all this collateral stuff that I'm into. How can I monetize this? And then you start seeing
criminal behavior, and you see also a rise in criminal behavior in China, right? So criminal also though. So there's also the public appearance, right? So you have Obama kind of being stern during the time their crisis with the stock market is. Obama threatens to sanction them. Now we all know darn well no one's sanctioning anybody. China, we need them, they need us, right? But he made that move in a time that they are panicked, right? Which is, again, a political play, right?
Yep.
I would have done the same if I was the president, right?
Cyber, PSY.
Yeah, cyber, yes. And so that played a part. And it again, there's also like a theatrics, right? There's all theatrics and stuff. And it's like, president he's coming out and coming to the States, and when they're sitting down, blah, 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 blah. And there's a lot of showmanship. Now, you got to remember, the Chinese people see this as well, right? Within China, and so he's got to kind of look like, this got to look cool to his people too, right? And you got to remember that the prime minister, the presidents of these countries, we get 8 years. They got an entire lifetime. They got to continue serving their people, right? So he's got to save face for a while. So he's kind of got like the don't do that, blah 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 blah. He got to say we don't know what you're talking about, but it slowed things down. But you are right. The OPM is also a big play. They got what the information they wanted, right? So on that end of it, though, is now there's this rising crime, both where the OPM data go. Notice they threw a shift and say it must have been a criminal hackers using the OPM, right? They actually came out with that shortly after. And what also, though, is there's a little bit of pressure inside of China because he's had to tuck his tail in a little bit, which causes doubt within their own country now. And so you're going to have some act-outs, some lash-outs, right? So now suddenly a rise in criminal activity. This is why you've seen also China really crack down on some of the Chinese dark web forums and stuff like this. So there's going to be some interesting political pressure that's going to go back and forth. And so, again, there's the theory of the OPM, and I think we can include that theory. And then we can also include the fact that right now, he can blame it on. And this is another thing we don't think about. Anybody coming out of China doesn't mean it's always been a nation state, right? You got to remember, someone's in their basement decides to do it. Heck, that's the best thing. A dissident in China that doesn't like China could go and make it look like it's an APT on purpose, so that it would put pressure on China. There's a lot of pressures coming from different areas.
For the bigger hacks, though, there's more resources than just.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that, but what I'm getting at is that there's a lot of openings for false flags.
To take out centrifuges is more just a dude in his basement.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but the only ones we've done, I think that was the Stuxnet, right? I think that it only went that way. It didn't come in this way, right?
Well, there are theories that the subsequent breaches they trace back to Iran. After that, and then there was some. But the theory is, and I'm going to take on that there was some kind of like subtle agreement between some nation states to be like, yeah, we can take your country out, and we could take your country out with the cyber.
Right.
So
it's a cyber arms race.
We're just going to back off. Now the theory is that they said we're going to back off, and everyone kind of fell below the radar, and is still maintaining access to each other's countries' critical infrastructure. Right. Just like in the 80s when we had nukes pointed at each other. It's like the Cold War.
Right.
That's what some people say we're at right now.
We are in the digital Cold War. I've been saying this for a while, actually. Yeah.
Can we say the cyber Cold War? Because that just sounds so.
I'm a digital forensics guy, okay? No.
I like digital. It's not Cold War because we don't have to say cyber.
I'm gonna make one of those like no cyber on your website things. Like we're a coalition against using the word cyber.
Damn. Look at that. Digital Cold War is available.
Dude, get it now. Get it now. Get it now.
We'll start a bidding in the next segment.
Cyber
Lance
Cold War.
I'll just start throwing money at you, Larry.
Larry, you jumped on that before I did. You know, Larry and I have this bad habit of buying domains when we're on the show.
Yes.
So what indications have you seen that we're in a digital Cold War?
Well, it's again okay. So the China thing alone, right, with the cyber peace thing, and just the theatrics on how that is. Oh, I don't know what you're talking about, but we'll shake hands. We'll stop doing that to each other. You got to remember the original Cold War. What it was for was an intelligence war, right? It stopped us. Like spies back then they were diplomatic, right? When I say diplomatic, it doesn't mean people didn't die. What I'm saying is. Spying was a diplomatic concept, which means that it kept us from throwing nuclear weapons at each other, right? Now, we got to remember, so people call an OPM breach an attack. It's not a cyber attack. It's traditional espionage. If it wasn't computers, you'd still have someone on the inside taking pictures of all of the stuff, and there's no difference. This stuff, the only reason it's known is because corporations started outing it, right? But when it comes to the roles of national security and espionage, that's always been the government thing, and the only time you heard about it is when they wanted something to come out of it, or when someone got caught.
They were either messed up and got caught, or they, like you said,
or there was some pressure.
I agree with that.
So now you suddenly change the game because guess what? You got the Mandiants, the CrowdStrikes, all the players that like invest in those kind of forensics and
investigating espionage now in the digital world.
They came across it and they go, "What the heck is this?" I mean, heck, Stuxnet was accidentally come across it by an antivirus company, right? You can't necessarily hide the same way in this game because there are backscatter and there are machines that are going to get their collateral damage that doesn't stay in Iran. It stays wherever the packet is, and you can get to that same box, right?
The story goes, if you believe the documentary Zero Day, I don't know if you've watched that yet.
Not yet.
They say that Israel's the one that cranked up the heat on Stuxnet and forced it to leak out. That's their theory.
And you know what? Politically speaking, that's a good maneuver, right? They're next door practically, and they're not afraid of being quote aggressive as their posture.
Yeah, we can blame Israel,
right? Because
if it really was,
there's larger impacts too. I mean, and everything that you guys were just talking about, and I was just thinking, there's this real effect of sort of punch counterpunch going on in a digital Cold War, and that I think is a pretty good statement. But at the same time, there's large economic effects that are occurring. That's a big deal.
Yeah. Holy crap. We're over time. We were having so much fun. I wasn't paying attention to the clock. Wow. So
Let's
now,
just keep going.
Yeah. Well, we can talk more in news because I got more news that'll let us talk about what we're just talking about and more. But 5 questions for you, Lance. We're going to play 5 questions on Security Weekly. Are you ready?
In a world where one man is ready. Yes, I'm ready.
3 words to describe yourself.
Creative, persistent, and curious.
It's almost like
Where have I heard that from?
Almost like you practice it. If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
2 things: ninja stars and pineapple juice, but it has to be rotten pineapple juice because it's actually, if it sits too long enough, it's a poison.
If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
Oof, that's a good one.
It's a good title.
That's a good
That's a
title.
good one. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good title.
There it is. That's a good one.
In the popular game of Ask Grabby Grabby, do you prefer to go first or second?
I don't even know if this is popular. Ask Grabby Grabby.
It's popular in Europe.
Yeah.
What is it exactly? Sorry.
It's a popular game they play in Europe
So would I go first?
called Ask Grabby Grabby.
You prefer to go first or second?
That's the only information you get.
Oh my gosh. First, just to get it out of the way.
Choose 2 celebrities to be your parents.
Oh, okay.
Alive, dead, living, alive, dead.
Okay, Michael
fictional
Faraday
otherwise.
is my father. And is my mother. Let's see.
And this is the 2000s. You could have 2 dads.
I was actually kind of thinking about that because I would have gone with Mozart. So the 2 M's.
The 2 M's.
Michael
Excellent.
Faraday and Mozart.
Thank you very much, Lance. You're going to stick around. We're going to do a technical segment, then we're going to talk about stories, so stay tuned. Don't go anywhere.
So we're not like.
Yeah, we do multiple segments.